Professor Akin Adesokan, because, like Mr. Akin said, there's a certain degree of attention to detail and a certain degree of peeling back on layers of history that the text does, that Akin Adesokan as a novelist does. So I believe that they're on the same wavelength. But before is Akin online? Aha. Before I pose my first question to Akin, I want to make a preliminary statement. And that has to do with something that the poet Derek Walcott said in a poem which he titled "The Sea is History." And when I first read the Dragonfly Sea, it was given to me to review by the Director of Translations in Iowa, the University of Iowa, 2019. And I couldn't stop asking myself in Yoruba, so writer by what in Africa? I couldn't stop asking myself, we have these kinds of writers on the continent, and we say there is, some people, some Gen Z people argue literature is dead, writing is dead, nothing is happening. It's not true. It's because they've not read the right writers. So yes, when you get into this text, you see history, you see a lot at work, and she does it so deftly. And I did send a review to Mr. Akin. And now we are discussing this text in the context of recalibration for not just for the continent, for the entire continent, because it's not the kind of thing we encounter every day. If you live on the Atlantic coast of Africa, I'm telling you, you have a totally different kind of experience from those who live on the Swahili or the Indian Ocean side. The kinds of imaginaries that you have on that side is very different from what you have on this side. But I don't think there's a better person to speak to how those two things mix and interplay than Professor Akin Adesokan. So, without wasting any more time, I'm going to pose my first question. First of all, Professor Akin Adesokan needs no introduction. I think that we are very lucky that he's making time to write fiction. He's written 2 books just like Yvonne Ovuor. He's written Roots in the Sky, and his latest is Southside. Before I ask him my first question, I have to say that these 2 writers are not writers you can speed read. You can't speed read those 2 writers. You have to read them properly. But Professor Akin Adesokan, if you're there, it's a pleasure.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes, it's a pleasure having you with us. And my
Pleasure here as well.
My first question to you is, what do you think fiction is capable of doing when it comes to recalibration of our imagination, especially on a continent like Africa?
Okay, well, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes. Loud and clear.
Okay, and I'm glad to hear that. Thank you, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here. And what Tade Ipadeola just said, I will actually just return it to him to say that you can have a better moderator or mediator, whatever you want to call it, in this kind of exchange than somebody like Tade. I can't say much about how much in how much regard I hold him. and the fact that publisher said they just grab him. It's like when you have gold, you actually don't know that you have gold, and you say, okay, well, it's just trinket. I can wear it anytime. And so that's why it's easier to grab Tade, because, you know, as the publisher said, he would do it, right? And the range of his ability, especially in matters like this, is hardly comparable. So I'm glad to be here. It's a tricky question that you've asked, and I'll just say that when I was thinking about trying to put notes together for this session, one thing that I thought about clearly and that I thought would be the best way to approach this was to think basically in terms of style, less about theme or large ideas. Those will come, but style, because writing fiction is about use of language, and the primary vehicle for that is stylistic. It's a big novel, as you know, and it's got a lot of big ideas. The reason I'm interested in style, in addressing this question, is because Yvonne was able to pull off all the big risks that she takes in this. And in this novel, you know, the fact that I'm thinking in stylistic terms is actually because what she does, I think, at the level of style here, in the level of language, which is the most immediate way of thinking in terms of style here, it seems to me like the realization, now concrete realization, somebody has achieved, as far as I'm concerned, in this novel, what the late Ivorian writer Amadou Kourouma was trying to do to the French language back in the 60s through works like The Sons of Independence, and much more recently, towards the end of his life, works like Allah is Not Obliged and Waiting for the Big Beast to Vote. Kourouma was overlooked and essentially sidelined by the literary establishment, because, you know, how dare you, French, the language of Molière, how dare you try to massage it in any way, especially from this corner of the world, Africa, that, as far as they were concerned, didn't have anything to do with literature until relatively recently. But what Kourouma was trying to do was to set out with the conviction that language is indispensable to narrative, on the one hand, and that no language will be given priority. Okay, it could be French, as it is English in this case. The story could be in English or French and Italian, but that the voices of the characters are not beholden to that central vehicle. And I think that that's one important way to approach what Yvonne has done in this book. So calibration, to think that, yes, I'm writing this novel in English, but I'm writing from a place, the Swahili coast, Eastern Seaboard, with a long history. I mean, people know about Swahili, that Kiswahili is, I'll have more to say about it in a way. But the novel is set on Pate Island, which is the Eastern Seaboard of I think in Kenya, and makes Swahili coast its larger environmental world. And when people are familiar, if you're familiar with African history, of at least the last 1,000 years, we know that Kiswahili is without question one of the successful attempts, I think, organic attempts that is, to forge an African language from external contacts that are driven largely by trade. So when Tade says that when you are familiar with the Atlantic, Black Atlantic, think in terms of the relationship between West Africa and the Caribbean, and of course North Africa, that you have a different sense of life than those who do sort of encounter a world through the Swahili coast or the eastern part, the Indian Ocean, which is called Zua Kwai, I think, in Swahili. They have a local language for it, just as we in West Africa also have a word for the Atlantic Ocean, I believe. Different words, that is. And so, but of course, as I said, all languages are are forged through contact with different languages, and of course we call them dialects. That's what linguists call them. But with Kiswahili, there's a range that does not exist anywhere on the continent, I think, and I stand to be corrected there, because it spreads from southern Sudan, from today's South Sudan, to as far south as Rwanda and the entirety of Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo, to up to northeastern Angola. So if you try to visualize the map of the continent, something that a linguistic community that starts from Sudan and goes almost as far, and in some cases even people say they speak Swahili in Mozambique, you know, and Zambia. So when you have that, that's actually an incredible amount of community building. And what the novel does with this is then to put Swahili in constant dialogue with other languages to make it constitutive, that is, of how the characters see the world and how they convey the perspective, their perspective to the reader. So that, you know, is one way that I would like to basically talk about how I see this novel approach the question of calibration. I have more to say, especially in terms of how literature does this. But I think I'll stop here now, just so people can assimilate what I'm trying to say.
I imagine so, especially because you took the angle of polyphony in the novel right out of my mouth.
Okay.
Yvonne Adhiambo Ovuor does not privilege one language above, and she's low, speaks Kiswahili, English, who knows what, Arabic, and she goes into the poetries of all these languages right up to the Congo. So she actually makes you think of the idea of polyphony differently. In fact, just as, you know, literature sometimes does some of these serendipitous things, Kenzaburo Oi turns out to be one of the most ideal readers of Amos Tutuola. And who could have imagined that that would be the case? When I saw the title, Dragonfly Sea, you know the Yoruba word for dragonfly? How many people know the Yoruba word for dragonfly? I know that Akin Adesokan knows the word. Yes, what's the word for dragonfly? Lame lame. If you live in the hinterland, the question you want to ask yourself is, why would this insect be called lame lame? But the truth of the matter is that without empirical evidence, they knew that this creature was capable of flying all the way from India across that vast ocean onto Africa. And how many people know that the most successful animal on the planet for hunt is the dragonfly? 95% success hunting. You have to be that good if you are crossing the ocean. And well, I don't want to go into the semiotics, but the question of language and of style is paramount, as Professor Akin Adesokan has said, in how the author approaches this question, and she does it well. She does it extremely well. It forces even those of us who are on the West Coast to look closer into how language is used for some of these purposes. So I want to move on quickly to my next question for Prof. The way we map language onto experience and vice versa is intricate. And there is actually no way of saying this is how it's going to go or that's how it's going to go. And I'm sure that when Yvonne was writing this, she couldn't have predicted this is exactly how it's going to go, plot-wise or. But the point I'm trying to make is this, that when you encounters this sprawling kind of book that starts here, goes all the way to Asia, crosses to Europe, and comes back, you've got to have a sense of language that is large as well. And I think she again does this well. And I see this in how Professor Adesokan approaches the novel too. In fact, I have a theory that there are two kinds of writers for the novel. There are those you read once and you get it, and then you begin to get it. And I think both of them fall into this category. I don't want to take too much of our time. I want to ask my question. The question of what may happen to us is, I mean, Trump just threatened that he may come in with guns blazing. This is an experience we don't want to have, really. But this is an experience they already have on that side of Africa, where drone strikes can take out an entire group, God forbid. Wedding processions, funeral processions, naming processions. This actually makes us ask ourselves about why we need to calibrate politically. Prof.
Yes.
My question to you is this. Words can't make water jump, but how do we get our political class to read these kinds of novels so that we don't have guns blazing situations on the continent?
Well, that's a that's $1 trillion question. That's the kind of question that we need Elon Musk's money to be able to address. There was something extremely insightful that Babafemi Ojudu said at yesterday's session. You know, Babafemi Ojudu, as you know, is a former colleague of myself, my boss when I was working as a journalist, and we spent time together at Ikoyi prison. Well, number 15A. I didn't get to prison. I think Ogaga went all the way to Ikoyi prison. All four of us with Jenkins Alumona. And then, of course, as publisher said earlier, he moved forward and then he got into government. He served as, I think, a term as senator, and then became personal assistant, I believe, to the Vice President Osinbajo. And he said something that, you know, I mean, I found it quite fascinating. I mean, he said that if nothing gives in Nigeria, that things will remain, that his experience in government Can you hear me? Oh, okay. Because
we can hear you. We can hear you.
Oh, okay. Yeah. He said that his experience in government has taught him that if nothing gives, if nothing is done that is dramatic, that is, if you want, cataclysmic or catastrophic, that something at the level of catastrophe in the Benjaminian sense, that Nigeria is going to remain the way it is for the next 200 years. I mean, I don't know what to make of that. I mean, I would trust somebody who has worked with the vice president, somebody who has been a senator, a lawmaker in the country, to say that. And I don't think he was given to that kind of exaggeration. Okay, so I do not, and my experience about the African elite, what you call the political class, in the past, you know, let's say even from the late 19th century, when we began to sort of develop this group of people who were conscious about their place in the world and were trying to mold it according to their class interest. My experience is that with the exceptions of those who emerged in the late 50s, early 60s through the mid 60s, people like Kwame Nkrumah or Patrice Lumumba, we have not really been lucky to have a class of Africans, a group of Africans who have the interest of the continent in mind. We have not. Those who have had, that we've had, have actually been writers, intellectuals, people like Wole Soyinka, Chekanta Diop, Ayikwe Ama, you know, I mean, I can go on and on. like that. So those are people who are actually thinking about what it is to be an African and how can you, I mean, that's what Wole Soyinka's work was about. How can you arrest this cycle of stupidity? And that's the way he used to put it. And so I don't give it to them. I really don't. I don't see it. I think, in fact, what I've seen, especially in the past maybe 25 years, when the whole wind of change began to blow across the world and then touch the continent, was that people were orientation changed. And you can see that in the fact that rather than develop our own societies, we'll be trying to build our castles in Dubai. People will, a president of Nigeria will be an American citizen. It's difficult to have that in other societies. Our last president died in Europe, died in England. And so, and that's actually common to most African countries. I think that the best way to imagine this is to actually invest more and invest more in writers, in artists, in thinkers. Because to a great extent, it was writing, it was scholarship, it was real imaginative work that shaped people like Kwame Nkrumah, like my good friend from Guinea-Bissau, Amilcar Cabral. Amilcar Cabral, he said he used to almost swear by note of a return to my native land by Aimé Césaire when he was a student in Lisbon in the 50s, you know. So, of course, writers don't make good politicians, and politicians are the ones who drive society. They are the ones who get into power and manage to use violence. But I think on most cases, the long view is always important. And I'll return to this novel. I mean, who could have thought? And you said that you were thinking when you read this that, oh, were there people in Africa? Were there people who can write like this? I mean, my own sense was this. And again, and I think I told you this a long, long time ago. You may have forgotten that when I read the poetry of Nero Kewole, I just told myself that, wait. So there is this kind of poetry that can come from Nigeria. This was maybe, I think it was to judge the Muson Prize in 2002 or something like that. You know, and I said, wait, what is this? So, I mean, hope is a very funny thing to have. But I think that once you have, and that's why imagination is our last resort anyway, that, okay, I mean, a Luo woman could write this novel, who actually embraced China in the way that it has not been possible for even some people who were close to China, who had never had any history of colonialism with China. And not just China, you know, there are moments when the character is caught up in Turkey. I mean, that's embracing the world. That's embracing the world. And actually, I think that that's really what we should invest our whole thing. And when I said the long view, hope and thinking in terms of the long view, we need to keep in mind also that revolution or catastrophe does not start immediately. It can actually be also very gradual, but you have to sort of keep it going. You have to keep it. You have to have that strength to believe that this is actually the way to go. And we've been chipping on it. We've been chipping at it for a very long time. So the way to put this for me is that the novel, the fact that somebody can write this novel is a logical outcome of the kind of hope that certain class of Africans have invested in imagination over a long period of time. So that's the best way I can think about this. And I think that that's where the potential lies. And the fact that she can also go and write this from a Kenyan point of view, but embrace the world, use multiple language, is actually gesturing to us in ways that we actually could find hopeful down the years. I don't know whether that makes sense, but
it makes a whole lot of
sure.
sense. It makes a whole lot of sense. As you were speaking to the issue, something else that I didn't plan came up. It has to do with a recent translation that Professor Akin Adesokan did of Akin Delano's Ayédáyé Òyìnbó into English. And in that novel, the central figure is female, but it's not a feminist novel in the traditional sense. I couldn't shake that feeling when I encountered the protagonists in Dragonfly C, because the central figures are female, but not in the traditional feminist sense of it. Uh, how do you think that works as a novelist? I'm not saying that females can't be central figures. In fact, I believe that university education in Africa sort of changed the traditional roles, because I grew up in a village and I have never seen old men telling stories. I've always only experienced old women telling stories. Hmm? But when the university system came, the first crop of writers we had were all, well, mostly male. And so the storytellers became male, and here you have it. But how is it done? How as a novelist now, I'm speaking to Professor Akin Adesokan, how is it done so well? So how is it how did she manage to execute this so well without making it overtly feminist?
Okay, well, that's an interesting question. It's actually something that I was thinking about as I read this novel. Incidentally, I think that genuine, I'm saying this very carefully. I don't want to be misunderstood. I'm saying this very carefully. That genuine writers, that is, those who actually approach writing, I mean, we all have blind spots. We all have ideologies, pet peeves, so to speak, when we write. So there's nothing that's value free. Let me also make that clear. But I think, in my own experience as a writer and as a reader, is that those who approach writing or the work of imagination, art in general, from a purely moral point of view, because there's morality in art, and I mean it's a moral act actually when you think about it. But those who approach it as such, who are not in it for either money or glory, or to push a particular agenda either through violence or falsehood, then they tend to not be caught up in isms, whether feminism, whether it's Africanism or Yoruba. Once you do your work like that, it's actually really quite, it comes through in a way that you don't have to worry about those isms. I mean, the best way to think about this is that very early on, people accused, and again, I will use Wole Soyinka because is one of my own compasses as far as engaging art, not just literature, but engaging art in general. His politics is a different thing, but we don't have to talk about that. In terms of, I mean, people often, most of his critics very early on thought of him in two ways: that his representation of women was not always progressive, and also that he also did not have class consciousness. Those were his Marxist critics. And of course, the irony, of course, is that over time, those people are more or less maybe eating their words or come to terms with the fact that Wole Soyinka was onto something, that Marxism or empiricism, whatever ism you want to call it, is just not the way for him to think of what he was thinking about. And so it was a distraction to him, and really dealt with those things. But the question about feminism is a very important one. And as you can see, I mean, again, I'm supposed to talk about Yvonne's book, but I'm using Wole Soyinka's thing because Wole Soyinka also approached his work in a way that I think is similar to what you are trying to get at with the question, which is that, look, in some of his work where you've seen this question, when you've seen female characters, you've seen them actually being more powerful than men. I mean, think of the best known, the case of Elesioba and Iyaloja. I mean, Iyaloja basically dragged Elesioba through the mud. That, like he was the most powerful man, but this woman came and basically dragged him. That final scene, you've never seen a woman sort of talk down to a powerful man like that before. So, I mean, what do you call that? That's Wole Soyinka. And early on, at least maybe 15 years before, in a play like Madmen and Specialists, look at what those two women, well, we call them witches in our own parlance. Look at the way they dealt with the man who had been to war, Dr. Barrow. Look at the way they dealt with him. So there's that. But, I guess that what I'm trying to say is that question about power, whether it's feminist, whether it's political, is better approached through an imaginative process that, that does not put that at the forefront. And I see that a lot in this novel. Okay, a child, a little child who actually goes to a man, an elderly man, and say, "Be my father, be my father," and the man was powerless. When I first read that, I said, "Well, okay, this is. I mean, if this were to be written by an American publisher, an American writer, they would say, no, this is child abuse, and maybe he's a pedophile or something like that, and then maybe." But look at the way she pulled this off. I was fascinated by that. A little girl saying, "Be my," and we have that. So, when you have, and then you can of course see how this lady sort of develops over time. From a little girl, she becomes another grown-up person, goes on the way and manages to hold her own. And so, I don't think, you need feminism or some kind of political ideology to put that across, because she was raised by, the mother was, Monira, the mother was a local woman who went away and came back and then was ostracized. And essentially, she chose her own family. She chose her dad and never left her behind. And I don't know whether you want to give the name of feminism to that, or to think, so I guess that what I'm just trying to say is that Yvonne approached this book in the manner of a work that does not need a handle, a political or ideological handle. And that's why it's successful. And that's why it's going to be a book that we'll be talking about for a very long time, I think.
I think I agree entirely. By the way, how many people in the audience have read the book? 2 persons. How many people intend to read the book? Publisher just told me now about the young man who indicated that he's read the novel. So I'm going to ask your question and your impression about the book. But don't let me forget that I want to ask a practical question from Professor Akin Adesokan. Now, there is something called, geographers call it the Mercator projection. Do you know what it is? The Mercator projection is a way of representing the Earth on a globe. And when you look at the traditional, the one you buy on the road, or you go into a bookshop and you buy a globe, you think that America and India and all those places are much bigger than what they are. The truth, the actual truth is that you can fit India, you can fit North America, you can fit all of Europe inside Africa, and there will still be a lot of space. The reason why that is so is because of the Mercator projection. Now, this has something to do with what the impression I came away with when I was reading Dragonfly see. The author never actually makes the argument that you have to redraw the map and get to a truer projection of what Africa is, where she lies, and what she can do. But through a lot of hints, you could see that that's where she was leaning. And I'm thinking that that is well and good for the very few of us who read this novel. But I think we need to go a step further to make sure that we task our cartographers, we task our map makers to make more realistic maps of the globe, so that the next generation does not grow up thinking. I know this because I read geography in secondary school, but you cannot keep thinking that London is the center of the world. No, you can't. I believe that one of the strengths of America was that they had thinkers who graphically told their people that, no, it is not the earth going around the moon. No. That's another matter for another day. So, Prof, how do we influence our friends in the sciences, the social sciences, to make what we know to be the truth, not just the emotional truth now, the actual physical truth, more visible to the next generation? Because for us, it's already over, but maybe there's something we can do for the next one. Prof.
So was that in respect to the position of the continent in relation to the rest of the world?
The position of the continent.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. When you were saying that, I was more interested in the idea of the globe as a sphere. Yeah. As a sphere. I mean, when you look, it's like a tennis ball.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, of course, with both the Antarctica and the Arctic, there's some kind of stability to it because you have to keep it stable. But I'm fascinated, and it's actually quite literally happening now. Yeah. The American empire is going out the door. There's no going back. It's going down. Okay? It used to be the Roman Empire. It used to be the Spanish. It used to be the one on which the sun never sets. They say it's the rise of China, and I don't really know about that. But I know that the American century is going down. So, and there's no going back. That's why you have Trump. There's no, I mean, all good things must come to an end. That's my own approach to it. So there is actually, technically speaking, no center. And it just happens to be a time when it was America's turn. And that dance is almost over. So when you think, not just entirely hierarchically, I mean, that's how we've lived in the last maybe 2,000, maybe 3,000 years before Christ with the Roman Empire. But when you think in terms of sphere, and you apply that to actually how things are happening in African literature. I mean, again, Adewale Maja-Pierce, who was here yesterday, wrote something very interesting in his book, A Mask Dancing, that there are no centers in literature. There are only moving, there are no boundaries in literature. Name again, the Chintu author. What am I doing with that name?
Chintu has already overtaken the author.
Yeah, that's right. I don't even remember her name. I'm sorry. So again, I'm just trying to say that thinking about this relationship between space and time, than to I mean, I agree with you that yes, because America had the power, it was able to arrange the notion of the movement of the stars in relation to the world. I mean, so that's power. That's actual power. And science can be fed that power. But I think that historically, given time, and that's preparing for this since Confucius. And it only happens to be the time. I don't know that it's going to last for that long, but that's actually a different question. But it's no longer, it's not modern. It had never really been. Only that they have.
That I'm taken away from. And it is the truth. it is the truth. Lao Tzu, all the poets have make a comment and ask.
My family now, I claim him. Family now, I claim him.
I've just been told that he finished with a first from Unilag publisher. So that's way to go, really. I don't know whether you were here yesterday. There was something very revealing that happened. A young journalist goes to seek employment, and this outfit offers this out of the regular salary to him. I'm talking about Waziri Adio. And this young man, because he's a thoroughbred, still wants to work with Tempo and the progressive journalist. So he comes over and says, I want to work with you guys. And I say, but this is what we can afford. And he's thinking within himself, these other guys are paying me 3 times what. Do you know what the Tempo people told the young Waziri Adio? We have been here a long time. Those other ones, we don't know about them. And do you know what Waziri Adio told all of us at the end of the day? Even the money they promised him, they did not pay. So, yeah, but we have taken too much of our time joking. Okay, Mr. Adesokan, please tell us what your impression about the book is, and if you have a question for Professor Adesokan, please ask.
All right. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Reading the book, I actually have a lot of questions running through my mind while I was reading the book, but then I want to give some commentary on my own opinion when I encountered the book. First of all, I really admire writing style. I admire the writing style because it gives me the perfect definition of a term I have always wanted to use: poetic prose. And while I was an undergraduate at University of Lagos, I read a text by T.S. Eliot, Mother in the Cathedral, which was an example of poetic drama. And I've been trying to see if I could get a one I could term so. Because when you see most prose written, poetry is usually at the beginning, but towards the middle or the ending part, you will not see any other poem. So it's just only the first. But in the middle of this work, you see poems keep recurring, and it's like a commentary on some of the things going on there. So it is something I find really admirable about the book. Apart from that, the sea, and then the main character, Ayana. I see the sea as a metaphor, a symbol of Africa. That is what dawns on me. Because if you read Langston Hughes, the Negro speak of rivers, even in that very poem, he spoke about how different rivers, right from the time, like even in the Bible, you come across rivers like Tigris, Euphrates, and the likes. And then Langston Hughes brought this into his poem, the Negro speak of river. And I see this author trying to do the same thing. That is why we could trace the connection of Ayana with the river. Even when she left Kenya, the river kept drawing her back, and eventually she came back to the pit. More thing I want to comment on is the dehumanization that comes with symbolism sometimes. When she went to China, and then she represents an idea of a person believed to be a legend whose sheep was shipwrecked some time ago, the focus was more on what she symbolizes and not on the treatment of her as a human who is capable of her own reasoning, on her own value. So I see that even the coming of the China, the forged scholarship they say they have given to her, fake scholarship they have said they have given to her, is not out of the desire to actually present Africa in any light, but it was like a kind of a means of elevating China and let the world see that China has a kind of connection with Africa, even at the detriment of a humanity that could have been felt from the aspect of the lady Ayana. And then I see her mother as well, Munira, who is like a microcosm of women in Africa who amount to nothing, but when they have the opportunity, like a child, a glorious child who brings them to limelight, then they are accepted by the society. But this acceptance is short-lived, because the moment Ayana seems like a failure and then have to run back to Kenya, the ridicule continues. So these are some of the things I struggle with while I was reading the text. But my focus is on the sea. I like the portrayal of the sea, and how the sea does not stay all the time. It moves, it transits. We could see the transition of Ayana from one locate to another, and then in the end, the sea settles. This brings back Ayana to our eventual state, Kenya. So this is what I...
Thank you.
If I may quickly respond to
what he said.
He had a question for me, but if not, that's fine.
No, my first
okay.
The angle is for him to give us his general impression, because actually I was going to ask a question about this unequivocal, unrestrained embrace of China. The Yoruba people have a saying. They say "Omilenia," and going back to your impression of the ocean, the sea. We flow in, we flow out. We come in with the tide, and sometimes we go back. I see a new interest in what China is doing on the continent. I see a lot of people, saying, okay, we have better partners now. Whether that is so or not. But my question for Prof is, how should we really approach this new dispensation with China?
Yeah, well, okay. It is a very big question again, just like the first $1 million. I think that so last year, let me put it, last year I served on a dissertation committee by a student from China. It was in East Asian Cultural Studies department, but because I worked on post-colonial stuff, she took my classes and put me on the exam. And she wrote a chapter that was actually by the chair, also was the best, and that was the one that she took from material from my class. And it's about the so-called Tazara railway system. Tazara was the railway system that China built between Zambia and Tanzania in the 50s. So, which is basically to say that there was a pattern of Chinese relations with the continent prior to the current thing that we're having. So China's presence on the continent had always been there, but it was a different kind of relationship. It was on an equal complementary basis. It was not hand down, build the AU center for us, and then take our materials away, bring trinkets to us and take our thing away. Very exploitative, So that was very fascinating. So what I'm trying to suggest is that there's already a model, like as in everything else. There's already a model of equality of, because Tanzania was under the regime of the rule of Julius Nyerere, who, if you want to think of him as having very good relationship with China, was the Maoists were still in power then. China had not gone full-blown capitalist or become state capitalism that it is now. So that for me was a model, and so this student was actually was a child of a family of railway workers in China. So for her also it was some kind of family history that she was trying to trace in her relationship. But she was reading a novel written by one of the participants. So the chapter was actually about a novel. It was an analysis of a novel written by one of the participants in that railway. One of the workers, maybe, I don't know whether it was fictional, whether it was biographical, but at least it was written by that. So I guess that what I'm trying to suggest is that in that novel also, it was very clear that the Chinese workers there were trying to relate to people on an equal basis. And even in Dragonfly Sea, we have a character like Jin, who is the love interest of Ayana at some point. So there's, I mean, and he comes back to the continent and learns the language, comes with her, with him, with her there. And so there is, I think, and this is perhaps controversial, but I'll put it this way. When relationship exists on the basis of equality or love, rather than exchange that is unequal, that is exploitative, it's likely to be sustained or sustainable. I don't know that the relationship between China and the continent is mirrored in this novel as such. So I want to make that distinction. I think this is a novel. And so what Okoyemi was saying about the fake certificate in the novel, I know that's the novel. That's a writer being moral, using the novel as a moral tool. Not keep giving. The novel is not the art is nobody's friend. It's not going to be friendly with Africa or friendly with China. It's basically just tell the kind of truth that you can tell as an artist. Okay, and the same thing, you see. So what I'm trying to say in essence is that, again, to go back to the earlier point, when you really approach literature with an honest moral mindset, then you'll be able to sort of cut through things. I mean, anybody, this book has been written about, there's a new book about African literature and China, it's written about there. But so it will have all of that. But you have to think of it as a novel that has its own morality, that's not going to be held accountable to what's going on in China, within, whether it's equal and all of that. I would quickly say something that there's also a film that came out last year, or maybe even earlier this year, by the Mauritanian filmmaker Abraman Sissako. It's called Black Tea. It's about a woman who abandoned her wedding in Ivory Coast and goes to China to learn to make tea. And of course, it's a major business there, but the boss begins to exploit her, actually wants to fall in love with her and all of that. So there's exploitation. But at the same time, young Chinese people were already actually learning African culture in China in a very important way. They were learning dances, they were learning African languages in ways that actually shows that they were embracing Africans because, so what I'm trying to suggest is that we have to think about this as a bridge also, and it goes both ways. The exploitation of African resources is our own problem. If we let people come and rape, that's our own problem. What people who go to China do is actually, for me, far more interesting than I think we have control over that. If we can't control it, then that's our own problem. But the more imaginative thing is actually what Ayana goes to do in China and how she meets other people there, creates communities, and that actually is more long-lasting and takes us all the way back to the example that I gave at the beginning about the Tazara railway system, which proceeded on the basis of equality.
Wonderful, wonderful. I can't believe that I have only 6 minutes more. Yes, because I am just warming up to the questions. Yes. So,
okay.
So I got very curious about the author and the novel. Dust, which preceded Dragonfly Sea, was largely restricted to Kenya.
Yeah.
But this is a more international, wider scope, larger ambition, and really, really sprawling. But I also saw that it's anchored on facts. There was a young lady that the Chinese actually determined carried the genome from China,
Yeah.
and they decided to do what people do nowadays and say, this is our contact person over there. And it's all well and good, You remember Fujimori in, is it Chile now?
Peru.
Peru, yes.
Yeah.
And the kind of support he got, I'm sad to say that we as Africans have not leveraged our diaspora the way we ought to, and we should. But I will not bring you up here without giving you an opportunity to ask Professor Adesokan a question. It has to be related to this recalibration of a thing or the novel itself. So, yeah.
So the question I would like to ask Prof, I don't really have anyone really so centered on this novel. I have one that I've always wanted to ask. Even yesterday I wanted to ask it, but probably in other sections I will have the opportunity. Is it possible for us as a reader to read a text objectively without actually adding iotas or slices of ourselves in the text? Because I realize that when I'm reading a text, without actually going deeper to the realm of subjectivity, because while I was reading this text, like you said earlier, to the realm of subjectivity, because while I was reading this text, like you said earlier on in discussion, while I was reading this text, I was beginning to infuse what China could be thinking when they came into Kenya to bring the lady out, you know, the kind of exploitations that could come from it. Is it a really good way of reading every time to somewhat be adding our own emotions to the reading processes? So that is the question, sir.
Okay. All right. Well, without your own blind spots. But it's almost always impossible because you are not a tabula rasa. You need to bear on this. So, and I mean, this has been said a lot by those who actually who have sort of pronounced the death of the author, like Roland Barthes' famous essay, "Death of the Author," that, you know, a writer is, you know, that the writer is just a language. The author does not matter. It is the reader. In fact, for the reader to exist, the writer has to die. Okay, so that's one way. But let me also use my own personal example, and I haven't said this. In the first page of Southside, there are distillations of ideas from several books. Okay, in that novel, it's a novel that has my name on it, but I can tell you that on the very first page, there are ideas from Eduardo Galeano, Wole Soyinka, Franz Fanon on the very first page. That's it. So if I had not read those books, I would not, you know. So in other words, their books feed mine. And when you come to this book, it is important for you to know that Ayana herself, Yvonne herself, is a collection of other people's writings. So it's perfectly okay for you, advisable for you not to, but I think it's okay. And the more people read, the more you read this kind of work, the better we become at making distinctions and making discriminations about it. But, you know, the best way to deal with any experience, any kind of consumption, is to enjoy it.
First,
okay, just enjoy it. Yes. That's the best way to think about it.
Thank you, Prof. Is there any question from the audience among those who have not read the book? All right. German has already pulled the plug. Prof, it's a pleasure to have you here as always.
Thank you.
And the audience has been engaged and beautiful. And now I have made a new friend who is closer to me. You see, I will always say now that I have another Adesokan close by. All right.
Let me quickly make a connection.
Take care now.
You know, every time I see this Adesokan, I was always asking him, are you related to Akin Adesokan? Because he remind me so much about you.
Yeah, well, we are now family.
Yes, sir.
I guess.
Because at UI in those days, Akin Adesokan was the bomb. Like, in fact, when he came to UI, he made all of us believe that we're not educated. He was always in the library. What is your problem? When I went to the library, I went to look at something, Mabel Tobirise, because she was always in. I would go there because of Mabel. But this man, we don't come to the library and read all the books. the Adelugba will say, go and ask Akin Adesokan. He was our junior, but he was, I can thank you himself and Ruben Abati, they were so exceptional. So when I met this Adesokan, that was the question. I said, are you related to Akin? He said, no. I said, you must meet Akin. I'm happy now that you have met.
Yeah, good to meet you.
Yeah. And it's about going overseas because of his brilliance.
Yeah, but actually, you have to credit the book trekkers. He was a product of the Wole Soyinka, blah blah blah. And there's another Adesokan they brought. You can ask them.
Okay. The book trekkers
So we're good.
Mercy and Olakunle. And it's a whole group. Sacred, Grace. Who else? Only 4 of you are here. They have a book trek in about 5 or 6 books today. They did about 7 yesterday. They are doing another 6. The book trek is a grant that we got from, if you see that H sign, that's the book trek. We got a grant from them. This is the 2nd year, but they are very strict. It must be a particular book about social vices, nothing about politics, not about religion, not about any other subject. If it's not related to the young people, you do not want to say it. So we've been able to do 12 of those books into the book trek, which is also run by Mercy. She's the lead of that group with Olakunle. So they were the one that brought Adesokan to our attention. This is Adesokan. Yes. There's Lukman Adesokan here too. And Kayode Adesokan. Adhiambo. Thank you. Leia Adenle, the author, is the only author we are featuring 2 of his books. Because you need to read Leia. But you have to explain. Anybody who is integrating, you should ask him, why does he use the green? You know, this, what do you call that green? It's not this one. That sharp, like neon green on his books. So the 2 volumes that we're discussing this afternoon has that color. You have to really read it. There was one I read, I was saying, where's his imagination coming from? Oh, Mr. Agonjo just said that Leye, who is online? Can you spotlight Leye? Mr. Agonjo just said Leye is a literary lunatic. I'm a reporter. I reported myself. Leye, it is not me who just said. Can you spotlight him so that we can go into the next section? Thank you very much, everyone who is there. Wọ́n sọ pé lunatic ni o. Mr. Akinjo ló sọ bẹ́ẹ̀ o, not me o.
Èmi ni lunatic.
Fọlọ́runṣọ́. Where's Fọlọ́runṣọ́? Kẹ́hìndé Fọlọ́runṣọ́. Oh, okay, you are. I hope you are not a lunatic. Okay. One more chair, please. You see, all these people who have bushy hair, there's something about you guys. So look at this Fọlọ́runṣọ́. He has bushy hair too. So we're going to your session. Leye, thank you very much for writing greatly. Great. You know, I told you in London during the Soyinka event, I said, sometimes when I pick his brain, I say, who is this guy? Where is he coming from? But then when you see him, you think he's a go-go guy. You think he's a guy who just who is on the street, who does things, but the imagination is crazy. Please, can we settle down? Can we settle down now? So, Kennedy Fọlọ́runṣọ́, where you are our lead. And so you call your please, let's settle down so we can start, please. Let us settle down so we can start. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Now I leave you in the hand of, you are not a Lu. Are you a Lu? Okay. You can start.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great privilege
privilege to be here this afternoon, and the honor is mine, so to speak, as a tourist. My panelists, I don't know whether they are okay. Kunle, okay, thank God. Kunle, my panelists, my able panelists, Kunle Fadairo and Mercy Kelani, can you please come up stage? Yeah, good afternoon once again. So Leia Denley's the two novels give a portrait of Lagos. But one thing that stands out is whether that portrait of
Recording stopped.
whether that portrait of Lagos, let me say the extent of the truism of that portrait, whether we will take it as a kind of travesty, because at some point I found some things in the novel concerning, not entirely a matter of disagreement, just concerning. So what will be the hallmark of that representation is whether it is a kind of travesty or it is the real deal, considering the fact that literature is not, it is a fiction, right? So we cannot say that it is an entirely true portrait of society. Therefore, the imagination of society is therefore central to what we have in the two novels. So, not to waste much of our time, I'll give an overview of the first one I have here, Easy Motion Tourists. The title itself is culled from a song title about someone who is a traveler, an explorer, and so the story follows the interests of a journalist from abroad in the electioneering process of Nigeria, who goes by the name Guy Collins. And we have another major character, Amaka Mbadiwe. So Amaka is someone who is very much interested in girls, that we call prostitutes. I wanted to refrain from using that word because of the technicality of its portrait in this novel, and which I'm subsequently going to explore across two generations. We are coming. You find it interesting. We are coming there. So the girls called prostitutes and Amaka. So Amaka is interested in these prostitutes, trying to protect their interest from dangerous men. So that wants to protect the interest of these girls from dangerous men, and the men are politicians, ritualists, the kind of people we have in a materialistic society, those who will stop at nothing to amass wealth. Then the story goes on. Amaka and Guy Collins, they fall in love. Then at the end of the day, you also have police in the investigation of the killing, the brutal killing, the ritual killing of a particular lady, and the story leads on to the investigation. Very interesting ending. The brains behind the whole issue is the police commissioner. The commissioner who is at the center of the investigation, the one giving orders, now turns out, ironically, to be the brains behind the whole killing. Now,
that is a massive giveaway. That's a massive spoiler. Stop.
Thank you, sir. So that will be enough for that. So I am going to discuss that with respect to Farouk Perogi's column of last week, Sunday Tribune, which says every level of society is criminal. And we see that playing out in this text. Okay, so to move to the next one, Unfinished Business, which seems like a sequel to Easy Motion Tourist. You still have Amaka and Badiwe protecting Funke's interests in this case. Then Guy Collins remains abroad. So Amaka comes to Nigeria. Amaka comes to Nigeria to salvage Funke from a very problematic situation, and investigation follows, etc., etc. At the end of the day, another spoiler, the church is complicit in the crime.
Stop. Come on. Kilo de. Ṣé mo ti ṣe man yìí ni?
Thank you, sir, Mr. Leyadele, for these two great novels. So my first question to Mercy. The issue of representation in this text, the representation of
decide what they want to do with their lives, even if they want to continue doing the sex workers, but then she dedicates her life to protecting them while they do it. So I really think the issues portrayed here are very agreeable with me.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mercy. Before my next question to Mr. Olakunle, I would like to ask Mr. Leye, can you hear us, sir?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Thank you, sir.
I heard every spoiler you give, I heard.
Thank you, sir. So, sir, relating to what Timmy has said, what Mercy has said, my question is that, would you have us take the issue of prostitution in this novel as a survival instinct or as an alternative economic prospect?
All right, thank you so much. First and foremost, I thank you so much for having me here. I have, long before I was published, wanted to be on this particular festival, so I am chuffed to be here. Secondly, I have Afro envy. So I just want to get that out of the way, that my Afro used to be that big as well. Unfortunately, I think it's thinning out because of age. Not unfortunately, thank God I am growing old. The issue of sex workers. First, I call them sex workers. I do not use that rather antiquated and very patriarchal term, the other term. Because let's face it, right? If most people in the adult work industry, at the front of the adult work industry were men, especially cis male men, we would have a minister of sex work. It would be a thing of pride. Universities would have degrees on sex work. Patriarchy is the only reason we look down on sex work and sex workers. I know that might rankle with some people based on very moralistic considerations, but ask yourself one thing. What harm does a person using their body with full autonomy, what harm do they do you or anybody else if they choose to make a living using their body? I can call my masseuse. There's an app I can get a masseuse here, with their massage bed and everything, and whatever it is I need help with, they'll sort me out. Non-sexual service, but they're using their bodies. And it's intimate because they are touching my body as well. So I personally do not think that sex work is something to be looked down upon. I, I have a feeling you're about to say something.
Not really, sir. I think that answers my question that you have portrayed sex work here as economic prospects. Something,
Yes.
so a kind of business, a legitimate business, something legit, as you put it in popular parlance. Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Lakunle, so my question to you is still on the issue of representation. Because, you know, as the Englishman will say, we should strike the keynote before pursuing the tune. You know, the story, if the story is a satire, then it says something about society. I want to point us to what George Bernard Shaw does in his Mrs. Warren's profession. Remember, I said earlier on that I'm going to discuss it across some landscapes of literary, what we have in literature. In Mrs. Warren's profession, we see that the woman is into sex work, but the titling of the novel makes it look like something so important. You know, Mrs. Warren's profession. And as Mr. Adeniyi has rightly said, that it is patriarchy that makes us look down on sex work. We see that in the novel, the woman is successful as a sex worker. And we see that even in this text, there are successful girls as sex workers. But because that society then was so religious, and, you know, there's another spoiler. At the end of the day, we get to realize that the husband of this successful woman, Mrs. Warren, happens to be a priest. So you see the criminality of patriarchal society in a way. So we'll come to that. But my question now, to Mr. Lakunle, in Unfinished Business. Now, do you also think the portraits of the religious leaders in this text is quite grotesque or is entirely true? Let me quickly read something from page 80. And I'm particularly interested in this paragraph because of the language used. It says, Joseph had discovered a message from Pastor K of ANA, Anointed Nations Assembly, the fastest growing Pentecostal church in the world, according to CNN. Its founder, Kolawole Ayotunde Kamal K, was according to Forbes magazine, the richest pastor in the world. The message was brief, and considering that it was in response to news of the GO's passing, strange. It had simply read, I will buy your jet. Now, this text talks about rich pastors, but not just rich pastors, affluent pastors. And there is this idea that the source of their wealth is not so pure. Then, in another climb, some will believe, oh, these pastors are like predators. They feed on poor church members. So do you think this general premise, as indirectly alluded to in this novel, is a given?
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. All right. That's actually a side question. You know, when I read this book, The Unfinished Business, the first question I asked myself is, why do the author use the religious context, you know, to address the atrocity in Lagos? Then I had a discussion with a man called Lateef Odetunde, because, you know, I want to get different perspectives of what this work is. And he said, you need to have a big and broader picture of what he's trying to say. So I would say, first and foremost, this text is like a microscope of what is happening in Nigeria, as a good example. So considering the fact that we have the religious concept where the level of atrocities drawing, especially from the Jew, the wife, the CEO, and everybody, it just to let us, well, no, like, it's not diverting our attention from the political aspect of corruption, but try as much as possible to also emphasize some areas of corruption in the religious context. Not precisely saying that in a religious room, or probably the CEO, the general overseer are actually corrupt. But, you know, recently the World Bank actually, just released the top richest pastor in the world, like top 3 richest pastor in the world, and I think Nigeria emerged the winner actually. So that is actually concerning too. So if Nigeria as a country, we have the richest pastor in the world, and the level of corruption, the level of poverty, the level of people actually dying as a result of not having what to eat, it's something we really need to put our attention onto. So I would say I will agree. I would say it's 50-50. I would say 50 from the aspect that yes, it is obvious, it's apparent in our society where we have rich pastors having private jets, luxurious cars, while the members is actually, I don't want to say the opposite, actually going to the will. And at the same time, I will not agree, because if I'm saying I want to agree, I want to disagree, I'm going deep into the religious concept. So yes, to some extent. But to expatiate this word very well, Otto Miller's Scarlet Letter, Ms. Warren's professions, we can see that all these ideas are concerning. Because if you have read Otto Miller's Scarlet Letter, the lady who actually devoured the woman who is actually the concern in the story was from the Pope, was part of the priest who preached in the church. So the level of corruption now, we need to pay more attention to the religious aspects, not tagging them precisely. But I think it is just a way of not shifting our attention like totally from the political aspect, but also let us understand that there are also deeper structure of things we need to concern ourselves into. If we are going to the religious level deeply, there are some areas we need to also envisage.
Thank you very much, Mr. Olakunle. Now my question to Mr. Leyadenle, sir, can you hear us, sir?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear.
Thank you, sir. So my question is, looking at the fact that society is a complex issue generally, and as Kunle has rightly said, corruption, although I wouldn't want to use that word so mindlessly because of its density, but to narrow it down to what we have here, the corruption in the religious body. Now, my question, sir, is that what would you have us believe to be the vision of society that this religious corruption has faulted? What vision of society? We see that society is not working, and this text has shown that the politician is at fault, the religious person is at fault, the middle class is at fault. So there is a way in which the our defunct society has a share of blame for every member, a thing of nomenclature. So what vision of society, therefore, does this religious corruption void, sir?
Okay. I think it would be faster if you didn't say "sir" all the time, because each time you say "sir" as well, I feel like it makes you think you're talking to Professor Shoyinka or someone else. Your questions are PhD level. All right. What you call corruption in church, I call blatant fraud. I believe that nobody knows better than the priesthood of any religion that their God is not real. I am not saying there are no good pastors or good imams or good anything else. There are pastors who actually believe they are saving lives, and who actually believe that by claiming 10% of your money and whatever else every month, that they are helping you reach heaven. There are people that believe that, and they serve an important purpose in society. Now, what vision of society do I think has been
affected by this religious corruption?
Yeah. Let us start from my own society as a Yoruba person. Before we had any contact with colonizers, every Yoruba person was so-called Onisheshe. In other words, if we're to, our religion was based on our history, our culture, our morality was based on our understanding of our place in the world. So, if you are an Onishishe person, you are hopefully trying to live your life according to Oromila's philosophy, as you know, Iwa Ikpele, a person of good character. So, what do I think society could have been like? Yoruba society, African society, if we did not come into violent contact with these other religions that seek to dominate, that preach that the dominance of man, not woman, not everything, man over everything else. God gave man dominion over all the animals, blah, 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 blah. I feel like we could have a society where, like most ancient indigenous societies, we will still be living in congruence with the nature around us. We will still have that thing that makes us believe in looking after every other human. We will still live a life where if I'm cooking and I've run out of salt, I can go to my neighbor's house. And I would not be afraid that they would think any less of me or they would poison me or whatever. I think we will still live that life where we are we are cooperative rather than competitive. The competitiveness that gave rise to, you know, the false pastors, if you want, it's really capitalism. You know, I was on the last session and we're talking about all these isms. I personally do not like using the isms because they are the thoughts of some white men at some point who had a very white view of the world, white supremacist view of the world. Yes, I identify as a feminist, but my own feminism goes back to when we didn't even need feminism. You know, before the Abrahamic religions, believe it or not, most religions and most gods were feminine. And it only makes sense. You know, society was based on cooperating with your neighbors, with everybody. You didn't take more from the land than you needed. We didn't have a need to, for someone else to pray for us. As a Yoruba person, I prayed to Mayori, you know. I think we could have had a much better society that did not have so-called capitalism.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. So, from what you said, I can infer that the capitalism we have in religious body is an offshoot of a sort of ideological conquest where the pastor has now become a kind of god, you know, feeding on or, you know, feasting on the resources of the poor. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, Mr. Adinley. Thank you very much, Mr. Adinley. My next question to Mr. Lakunle. The title of this novel is Unfinished Business, and we see that it is something so open-ended. So unfinished business will be even Amaka's own savior endeavor or exercise in the novel, and the issue of political malaise in this novel is still unfinished because, you know, revolution is not a one-time thing. Now, there is another literary, I take it as something literary conversation between Amaka and one character here, where it says, what are you going to do? Nothing. Amaka, I don't know what I'm going to do, and that's the truth. I just have to get her out, but how, I don't know. And when I do, what I'm going to do after that, I really don't know. So that absurdist expression is central to the project of liberation from economic corruption. Do you understand? So that's, you know, that not knowing what to do, the idea of nothing, you know, we are only trying. So I don't know what to do. What I'm going to do after that, I don't know. What will happen next, I don't know. So, Mr. Lakunle, do you think the business here in this text of liberating Funke, trying to get the money, you know, there is a central issue of trying to get $100 million buried somewhere. Okay, so that's unfinished business. My question to you is that, do you think, as portrayed in this novel, do you think this society can attain economic equality anytime soon, where we don't have pastors feeding on the poor, where we don't have politicians feeding on the poor masses, and where we don't have rich men, the club of capitalists trying to take advantage of vulnerable women? So do you think there can be economic, social, you know, all sort of equality that will make society work? Do you think we can achieve that equality anytime soon?
Okay, as Mr. Adele Adene actually rightly said at the beginning, he said, once we practice the system of capitalism, I don't think I don't think the solution is coming very soon, because the capitalism concept is always the hierarchy of the rich versus the poor. And like what actually said earlier, he said before the colonization in Africa, when if you go back to the part where you don't need to probably trade, probably can go to your neighbor to get something. I think the solution is, but I don't think it's practical in Africa, is to go back to the origin. To go back to the origin, to go back to how we started as an Africa. And going back to that, how we started as an Africa, is going to be like starting over again. It's not even possible, because the system of capitalism is like debating with God. So first and foremost, I don't see that future coming very soon, to be honest. But rightly with the topic of for this session, which is cleaning the society, Lagos Nick Amaka, I think the solution is in this book, Unfinished Business, is actually just like passing a baton or a mantle to everyone individually. We all are the Amaka. We are the Amaka in this story. We are the one that needs to pass this mantle, because the business is unfinished, to be honest, in the story. Yes, Amaka tried to help Funke, tried to rescue Funke from the police station, tried to rescue Funke from the captivity of the political, but at the aspect of this, after the rescue, it ends there. That is the limit. That is the highest Amaka can actually provide for Funke. So the next thing is for individual, and I think the revolution is that everybody needs to come to the consciousness of what is called the liberal entity, because that ideology of individual succession needs to come to terms. And I think that is actually what Leye Adene is actually doing this way, because first and foremost, the concept of capitalism has eaten deep, both at the religious, the political, the social level, and it's not coming any soon coming to end. The only thing we can do is that individual needs to be the Amaka, because we need to clean this society. We need to purge the society from these atrocious acts. And the only way is that I pass the mantle. Amaka has done his own part in the story. The next thing is that we individually needs to be the Amaka, standing for ourselves, regardless of being a feminist or not being a feminist. As long as you are human, you see what is not right, you go come into terms and solve it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Lakunle. Still on Easy Motion Tourists. One more question and we move to...
Should be insulting to even our senses to listen to what any colonizer nation tells us about us. They have propagandized us and the rest of the world for so long, and you only need to look at someone's antecedents to be able to understand what they think about you or what they think about the world. You know, how many people have you know, other nations in the world enslaved en masse? Chattel slavery, transatlantic, trans-Saharan slave trade, the First, the Second World War, you know, all the places America has gone to give them democracy. Libya, which was not a capitalist nation, sent into the Stone Ages. So anytime any one of those people tell us anything about us, let us remember that they are saying it, even if they're not conscious of it, they're saying it from the centuries-old propaganda that's been fed to them and to the world. they don't see us as we see ourselves.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Adinley, thank you so, so, so much. I like the premise you have given. I like the theoretical, practical, and ideological point of view, because they actually relate to the text. You know, the subject matter of both texts is so sensitive that if one does not approach it the way you have done, sir, one will almost trivialize it. One will take it as something so vapid, you know, a regular portrait of a defunct Lagos where everyone is just in.
Hello, everyone. Is your mic ain't working? Hello. It's still not working. Microphone don't like me. Eh? Let's see what's going on. Okay. I think I'm just gonna stretch my voice eventually. Hello. It is better. Thank you so. Oh, you're wonderful. Gracias. Let's double it. Let's double the effect. Hey, Leye. Hi. Well done to the panelists. Great conversation. Love it. But in particular, Leye, I just want to say thank you for two key.
Of two things. Number one, as a Yoruba person, I like to speak from a place of authenticity. So I would not say as a Nigerian or as an African or as a black person. As a Yoruba person, I don't have gendered pronouns in my language. You know, there is no he or she. This gendered language or gender itself, not sex, is an European thing, as far as I'm concerned. And perhaps that is also, in fact, not perhaps, that's also one of the reasons I have a strong thing. I do not like ma, sa. Ma and sa do not exist in my language. We could call somebody, we could show that, okay, baba, different from baba, yawa, you know, to just show that this is a very elderly person. But we didn't go about, I keep saying this, Africans are one of the few people that still practice the religions of their colonizers. And what we don't realize about religion and the power of religion on your psyche is that your religion is your culture. Everybody's religion is your history, your culture. In the Odufa, the oral corpus of the Yoruba religion, I can tell you the history of every Yoruba land, of all the kings, and I can even tell you how people became deified. You know, I have our medicine in.
Latif and the mister in front of.
By the way religion has been tackled in the panel section, and I want to let out my displeasure. So in the panel section, we look at religion, and I think the focus has been on the religion leaders. This is one of the cankerworms eating through Nigeria, and this is because we focus more on the leaders, while the masses, the followers, are just seen as persons that are to be pitied, whereas we do not actually account for what the masses represent. And I will justify that. When we talk about pastors, I haven't read Mr. Leye's work, but I could get some hint of what he's trying to say through the discussions. When we talk about pastors, comes to religion, and then he spoke about, you know, how we have been colonized and how
Good afternoon, everyone. So I will also be talking from the point of view of religion as well. And I have
Sorry, can I
something
respond
very...
to the gentleman first?
Okay,
Okay.
sir. Please go on, sir.
Right.
Go on,
Thank you
Yadele.
so much for that. You mentioned that if you were practicing Ogun or Shango or something, that you might not be here, you might be violent and all of that. Here's the thing. All those violent things you allude to, they do not exist in the holy book, the Bible of Ifa. Just like money ritual of using a human being or killing any human being does not exist in the corpus of Ifa. And when you go and consult Ifa through an Iyanifa or a Babalawo, they don't get a spiritual voice speaking to them and then they speak to you. They only speak to you from the oral corpus of Ifa, from the Oduifa, rather, the Oduifa. So, and there's no, what you've talked about does not exist. However, and this is not an attack on anybody's religion, however, when we look at the Christian God, the Abrahamic God, not the Christian God, the same God of Moses, the
Two of them, they're running the book track. We have 10 authors waiting for them there now. So you can continue to engage with Alea. So thank you.
Because when Kule asked me a question concerning unfinished business, in fact, I've not read the book. It was this morning. So he was trying to finish the book that a devoted Christian. I'm sad Kule is not here again. He said that the author of this book cannot be a devoted Christian because of the way he's portraying Christianity. And I said something that, see, it's not always about the Christianity. It's not always about the religion. There are times that it's about the people. Okay, and we cannot keep blaming. I mean, they left us several years ago. I mean, the colonial masters. We cannot keep blaming what they brought and ignoring what we are and who we are as people. Okay, we are shifting attention to religion when it comes to the idea of corruption and who we should hold accountable are the politicians and all of that. Whereas my own opinion is, it is not as if we are shifting attention to religion. I just think we cannot discuss corruption. We cannot discuss what is happening, the atrocities happening right now in Africa, in Nigeria, without talking about the religions.
Thank you, Latif.
It's not possible. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Latif. Last one.
Okay, Ola Olulash. I'm just curious, especially because of the title. I've listened to Easy Motion Tourists, of course, by Fatai Rolling Dollar and, of course, King Sonny Ade. And that's got my mind thinking that, okay, it has to do with something that maybe it's the social life, and things like that. But my question to the author is, was it deliberate to mislead in terms of the title? And then what informs, if that's not the case, then what informs the choice of Easy Motion Tourist? Thank you.
Script was called 48 Hours in Lagos. Because the entire action happens within 48 hours. So the crucible I put my audience into is of time, and it's of so much happens in 2 days that makes up an entire crime thriller novel. But my then publisher, rightfully pointed out that people might mistake it for Eddie Murphy's, 48 hours or another 48 hours. And I agreed because I didn't realize how old I was by then. Because a lot of people don't even know what 48 hours is about. So I really wish we called it 48 hours in Lagos. But I thought, okay, let me make it something about the book, 48 hours in Lagos. And then my publisher pointed out that people might not know that that's
Lagos as a materialistic society. My question to Leia Denley, my final question, and it still relates to all that we have said before in one way or another. And just before that, I would like to respond to what the first commentator said, or the first, the woman that spoke first, about how the woman that spoke first, about how I have used the word prostitute, how that the word is not, it is not legal to use that word. I made it clear right from start that that's why I said quote and unquote. If I were to write that, I would have italicized it to show that I am concerned about the context, the immediate context of the word as implied by the author. Now, my question to member of society. My question now is, looking at what was the case many years ago, how that the woman was a prominent force in economic prosperity. Leye, do you think there can be a change where the woman will still maintain her economic prosperity and men will not take advantage of our vulnerability?
Yes, I believe that this is a world that is possible. Why? This is a world that existed before patriarchy. I believe strongly that patriarchy is as much an invention of Europeans as capitalism. I did economics as my first degree. They taught me capitalism almost as if it was a fact of life like gravity and whatever. But the fact is certain people who were white with a very white lens came up with this term, capitalism. Now, can we go back to a time when we had a more egalitarian world? Absolutely, there are people who've managed it. There are people who do it in their own lives, in the way they relate with people. But here's the thing. Can you hear me?
Clearly.
All right. Here's the thing. I believe that Oyibo people, the same generation of Oyibo people that created capitalism, and I know this because there are so many, I wish I brought some books downstairs. You can study. It's for example, wants to go to war, they will make up a lie. There is a Christian genocide in Nigeria. No. Nigeria is being disrupted by Boko Haram, which is sponsored by America. We know as a fact.
Thank you.
Oh, Venezuela is smuggling drugs into America. No, you want the oil. Oh, Libya has this. Oh, my weapons of mass destruction. All this BS that they tell us.
Thank you.
Now, when these same men who created slavery and they went about killing women, Kusinko Kotonje witch, they went about killing women, and what happened to those women's businesses, to their property, to everything? Gone. What happened to women after they?
Now I have ears like you, so that me too I can be that intelligent. Now, did you agree that Leia is a Lou? Literally Lou. I won't say the rest. Okay, just take picture with the chair. Because we have to go, there are people waiting online for the next session. Oyindamola Olatokun, who actually had to go and write an urgent exam today. That's why we had to switch the program. I hope there's still something in your head to give us after the exam. So, okay. So we're just going to have only Oyindamola will be here because Professor Akin Adesokan is online. Do you have any other person? Okay, Tade Ipadeola. Oh, sorry, two seats. Sorry, Tade Ipadeola. Maybe because he's eating puff puff. See, we're not eating puff puff. We're just yes, sharp. So, Tade Ipadeola will be.
It's is it 5 p.m. in Lagos now, right? Past 5. My name is Akin Adesokan. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. Moderator was no, I wasn't sure what a discussant would do. That was my challenge in the morning by his code. Essentially to say that my name is Akin Adesokan. I'm a writer scholar based in Bloomington, Indiana, the University of Indiana. That's where I'm speaking from. So I'm the moderator for this discussion of a novel by Diana Evans, a British Nigerian, I believe. I don't know how she goes, but she has Nigerian heritage, and I think she's been in Lagos. This is her 4th novel. It's called A House for Alice. It's, of course, in a sense, resonant of House for Mr. Biswas, by Naipaul, but it's a different kind. Always veering towards what you might call magical realism, a very powerful one, actually quite convincing. And I really like her writing. I have my own criticism and all of that, but I just want to lay this out there. And I'd just like to pose a general question to both of you, and you can take turn to answer. Maybe Tade would let Onikan go first, so that she can at least introduce herself to me. The question is essentially to say that, as I said, the writer has Nigerian heritage. To start from where we are and then go from other aspects of the novel.
All right, good afternoon, everyone, or good evening. Good evening, Mr. Akin Adesokan. My name is Oyindamola Olatokun, also known as Adufe Onibata. So at Scora, I'm the volunteers coordinator, and professionally, I work as a customer service associate in an advertising firm. Okay, so about what I think about the book, Yoruba would always say, Ilela Bosimioko. Now, wherever you find yourself in the world, wherever you go to, whatever it is you do, you only find peace when you're back home. And that is the whole essence of this book. So the book centers on Alice, who is over 50. And she's married to a British, which is Cornelius. So she has 3 daughters, Melissa, Carol, and Adele. So after she lost her husband, she just thought to herself, okay, I think it's time to find meaning to myself, right? So she, apparently, according to the novel, she left Nigeria during the Biafran War. I think she lost some family members, and that was what brought her close to her husband, right? Because they had like a common ground, where you could just look out your window and just be happy because you are home. So basically, for her, home was freedom, wherever it is. So I also got to learn that home does not necessarily refer to a place. Home can be a person, home can refer to a set of people, home can refer to you just finding peace within yourself. And that's basically what the novel is all about. Thank you.
Thank you for that panoramic view of the book. I got this book 3 hours ago, two and a half hours ago. So I had to do some crash speed reading. But what struck me immediately was that a book can't possibly be more Nigerian in its making than this book is. And now I understand the reason why Nero Okewole, more than 12 years ago, told me you have to read this author. I did not heed him at that time, but now I think I do. Why do I say this? This is a very clever plotting, and it's all geared towards creating this larger sense of community. She starts with family, but she ends with community. And which question amongst us is more Nigerian than the recalibration and tribal societies. And I think the clever thing that Diana Evans did in this book is to use one tragedy to as a staging ground to say you have to reclaim your sense of community. It's interesting that she's doing this in the UK. I have a feeling that there's a there's a reason why people do that, especially when they're abroad. I remember distinctly that my first trip to the US, I had this fairly short telephone conversation with Professor Adesokan. And one of the things he said to me was, if you want food that is close to the African food, go to the Mexicans, go to this, go to that. Only those of us who grew up here know how critical that piece of advice is, because it's one of the ways in which we keep our communities going. Unfortunately, that sense of ourselves is dying because of extreme capitalism. Extreme capitalism. If you were here for the last colloquium, you know that Leia Adele tried to make a case for
So she's like, you cannot just decide to live all your life in Lagos, forgetting that you came from. The restaurant where they were having her birthday party, complaining about how nobody listens to her, how her mother wants to travel and doesn't think about them. But at the end, she's not a baby, she's not a child. She obviously knows what she wants and she wants to go home. So we young people, we need to understand that as much as we want our parents to evolve, we should also know that they have a mind of their own. And they actually know what they want. So eventually, they had to just let go because she really wanted to find peace. You can imagine living over 50 years abroad, and it is until your husband died that you realize that, oh, I think I still need to do something. And then you're hell-bent on doing it, and then your children are saying something else. Of course, you have to fight till the end. And she did, because she found her way back to Nigeria. And then her children, obviously, they would probably go once in a while to check on their mother or call her via Skype, like some of them. decided to, and they also taught her how to use the technology and all of that. So basically, this book is just tells.
So what it takes for them to do those things. They train so hard that the clubs that they play for, they attach monitors to them to sleep. I think that the title of this book is clever. She could have said, the author could have said, a home for Alice, not a house. A home is a more intentional thing. A home doesn't necessarily have to be a house. And today, there's a portion of Ibadan, if you know Ibadan, there's a whole portion of Ibadan in Bodija where you see empty house after empty house after empty house after empty house. And that is what Nigerians are. But I tell my children, I tell them that there was a time in this Lagos, when I was in law school in this city, that if you were driving a Lexus or a Pathfinder car, this was circa 1992, 1993, you were prime target for armed robbers because that was what they were looking for. Today, if they gift you but that is sort of telling us about that it's
interested in how that tension between the family and the community sort of plays out, maybe especially with the character, again, maybe like Melissa, you know, the youngest daughter. I mean, you may remember this. Can you hear me?
Can you repeat the question?
So I'm saying that, can we look at a character like Melissa, one of the youngest?
Walk in the park or a sweet one like that. So, and then I feel like that might in a way have set like a, how do I put it? It might have set like something in their mind or in their thinking of how a marriage could be, or how, you know, the way people from broken homes think about things or reason about things is quite different from people who grow up in a loving and all family, right? Gap or like a bridge in their mind or in whatever it is that they do there also made them display the same thing in their marriage, and it made it look like it was a pattern. The mother had the same issue and now the child is having the same issue and all of that. So it's all still boils down to the family. If the family,
the world at large is your home. It's been in my peripheral vision, and I am looking for a way to find an explanation for it. I think that writers like Diana Evans, British as she may be, African in part as her DNA may be, have that more pointed resolution to make every day. Every day. And what we can do, the least we can do, is to make sure that we at least read them. Again, it goes back to the question that you answered, you tried to answer earlier. Now we are more open about discussing
this idea that, for her too, for the author, that there is an element of continuity. But I want to also add the fact that it is, for all of that, a very British novel, by which I'm not saying that it does not have any other investment in Nigerian or African life, but that it is a novel that is exploring different dimensions of life in the place where people find themselves. And if the mother wants to go back to Benin, it is not something that the children share. In fact, I found a very fascinating moment there, and I was actually going to ask a question about this, which I didn't want to ask at the end, which is, at some point when the daughters were trying to convince her not to leave, one of them said, "Oh, okay, we'll bury you there when you die." That's what I think. I don't know which of the daughters said that you don't have to go. But in any case, if you are so fascinated by the place, when you die, we'll actually bury you there. And I found that to be interesting, and really, I don't know that that's the kind of conversation that Nigerian children will have with their parents. You cannot wish your parent to be dead and say that when you are dead, we'll bury you there, something like that. So I have a question point as readers. What do you make of a worldview that you identify with at the level of being a reader, just getting into the groove of the story, and then coming to a moment where you have a great deal of tension with the way in which that word. One general question that I think I would like you to take turns to answer.
Okay. So basically, Alice lived her life for her family members. She lived her life for her husband. She lived her life for her children. And Carol just wanted to do something that she wanted so much. When Yoruba would say, it's because he actually wants to achieve something. So she kept on emphasizing on her going back to Nigeria because she wants to find peace, because she wants to rest. And Carol was just all out to make sure that her wish comes to pass. So Carol eventually had issues with her sisters because they were like, "Why are you fueling what mommy wants? Why can't she not stay here? Or she can come live with me, or she can shuffle our houses and all of that." And Carol was like, "She's not a child. This is what she wants. Let us give her what she wants." And Carol was, out of all her children, Carol was the only one that followed her back to Nigeria. She was the only one so invested in giving her mother her last wish. So I feel like it was a good one because she wanted which is her dream, which happened because she actually made sure that she went back to Nigeria. So it was a win-win for all.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much, Prof. And a lot of thanks to the panelists because the way you have discussed this book has made it very, very interesting for me. I think I would read this and I want to do a very comprehensive review of the book. So thanks so much for the insights. Having said that, I think from your discussion, I don't know because I've not read the book. I want to know to what extent identity geographical identity, generational identity, and Oyindamola's insights about how the children felt about, going back and things like that, and of course, UK, Nigeria, and those whole realities about space and time, how it played a role in this work. That's one. The other point I would be interested in having your perspectives on is the fundamental question, which is something that has become very big in Nigeria, the Jakpa and the Jakpada. So there is the whole discussion now about reverse Jakpa, and the fact that people Jakpa only to start thinking about, about Jakpada. So how does this also play a role in pushing the boundaries of this story? And the final point, which I would like to know your perspective on, especially Prof, is the point around the disinformation. There's a lot of disinformation about, Nigeria, it's all evil, yet you see people who still are investing in the process of returning back to that space. What could we also do about welcoming the people beyond the questions of things like we are collecting remittance from abroad and things like that? So how do we also now open our arms to now welcome the people that are very much ready to Jakpada? Thank you.
All right. Tade, do you want to, I can wait on that question. I have the answer, but I would like to give you the floor if you want to answer any of them.
No. I think you are in the eye of the storm.
Oh, okay. All right. I know you. You are not your man. Okay. So, okay, it's a straightforward thing. Nigeria is a tough place to do business. Okay. It's always been like that. It goes back to what I said at the beginning. In the first session, that if things don't change in Nigeria, things would remain like this forever. And I think, I'm always hopeful, but I'm always skeptical about any statement, whether pro or cons, So I take that with a pinch of salt. But I do want to say that personally, my own impulse is to invest in Nigeria, to actually be interested in giving back or putting back. So whatever situation, whatever help can be given to actually make us invest more in Nigeria, because as we know, in most societies, people have always gone away and brought things back home. We are always the one who are taking our own stuff and giving it out. We sold our own people into slavery. We let other people, we took gold and took it to Mecca just because we wanted to show off and all of that. So I think that, again, one thing is because power rests with those who are in government. Okay? I think that we need on a very generously. So once you if you put money, you want to build a house, put 10,000 there, and there's no way for you to find out that that house will be built for you, that's a problem. That's a question, the problem of trust is there. The problem of, do you really want to go there? And when you build that house, are you going to be able to live there if the resources, the facilities that make a house livable are not available?